Summer in California's Redwood National Park is a special kind of hell. Hot, humid days are the norm, but every so often the fog rolls in, bringing welcome relief from the oppressive heat. It can also obscure the trail, which is exactly what happened to the two best friends who never came back. Hi, I'm your host, and you're listening to this channel. This is the story of Nicholas Berg and David League, two veteran hikers who disappeared in Northern California's Redwood National Park in the summer of 2019. Despite an extensive search by park rangers, volunteer search teams, helicopters, and even cadaver dogs, there was no sign of Nicholas or David. The case grew colder with each passing year. Then, in the summer of 2023, over 4 years later, hikers discovered human remains near an enormous redwood tree. But what did it all mean? What had happened to the missing men? And what dark secret was the ancient forest hiding? Nicholas and David were extremely close friends. They did everything together, including hiking and backpacking. They'd planned the trip for months and had done some of the hikes before. They knew the area like the back of their hands. When the guys didn't show up at their friend's house on August 4th, 2019, at the end of their trip, nobody thought much of it. They were experienced campers and hikers. They had plenty of supplies, and they knew how to forage for food if needed. So their friends and family just assumed that they were still out on the trail, enjoying the majestic redwoods. But by the time the sun set on August 6th, their loved ones began to get worried. They hadn't been heard from since the day before. A search party was assembled and the friends set out into the woods. The searchers were shocked when they found the guy's car in the parking lot. It wasn't just that they hadn't seen it on the trail, it was where it was parked. The vehicle was in a spot for day visitors. Overnight campers had to drive past it and park farther down the road. The fact that Nicholas and David had deliberately parked there was odd. But now, knowing that something was wrong, the search party moved quickly into the redwood forest. The biggest problem was that Nicholas and David could be anywhere. Redwood National Park stretches for over 400 square miles in Northern California. Within the park, boundaries are over 400,000. Acres of old-growth redwood forest and more than 150 miles of coastline, home to 45,000 people, most of whom live along the coast. There are also many hiking trails through the trees, some well-maintained, and some barely visible game trails. And because of the intense fog that can roll in suddenly and without warning, it's easy to lose your way. Still, the friends weren't worried. They had a map and compass and knew the trails well. If they were lost, they wouldn't be for long. But the longer the search went on, the more concerned their loved ones became. So they called in the cavalry. Soon, the park rangers had enlisted the help of volunteer search and rescue teams. Search planes flew overhead while hundreds of people combed through the undergrowth on the ground. But all they found were more redwoods. There were also lots of mushrooms. After a week of searching, one of the rescue workers said that it almost felt like the forest itself was trying to hide something. He explained that the team had found a lot of mushrooms growing underneath the trees, which is normal. But the species of mushrooms found were the type that grow in areas where there is human decomposition. The presence of these fungi was unsettling, but the searchers had nothing to go on. They searched wherever they thought Nicholas and David might have gone, but they turned up nothing. Days turned into weeks, then months, then years, and the case grew cold. All that time, their families never stopped looking. In the beginning, David's brother Mark felt hopeless, but he couldn't bear to sit still. He started looking on his own. Over the next few years, he searched every inch of the park. He hiked the same trails Nicholas and David had taken so many times before. He sat by the river, hoping for a sign. All he got was mosquitoes. Mark spent countless hours studying maps, poring over every detail. Then in the spring of 2023, he hit on something. It was an obscure logging trail on the Jedediah Smith State Park side of the national park. It was so overgrown that it wasn't even marked on any of the park maps. So why were Nicholas and David there? Nobody knows. But Mark wanted to check it out. On May 18th, 2023, Mark headed out onto the logging trail with 3 friends. The forest was thick, the trees impossibly tall, and the air was stale and damp. Their cell phones had no signal. They were completely alone. As they walked deeper into the woods, they saw signs of life, deer tracks, and the droppings of smaller animals. But there was no sign of Nicholas or David. Still, they kept going. Suddenly, the trees opened up to reveal a small clearing. And in the center of the clearing was an enormous hollow redwood. its branches reaching towards the sky like arthritic fingers. The huge tree had been hollowed out by fire, lightning, or rot, and the hole ran the entire length of the tree. Inside the tree was a mass of tangled roots, dirt, and rotting wood. But what really caught the group's attention was the fungus that covered the inside of the trunk. The strange white growth seemed to pulse with an eerie inner light. As they stood there staring at the tree, one of the guys noticed something moving within the fungus. At first they thought it was a lizard or a small animal, but when it began to move, they realized it was something else entirely. They watched in amazement as the white growth writhed and pulsed like a living thing. Then it occurred to them that they were witnessing something truly unique, possibly even otherworldly. They returned to the clearing every day for weeks, watching as the fungus grew and pulsed. One day, something new appeared. Mark noticed a small indentation in the fungus, something that looked like a toothprint. At first he thought it was just a trick of the light, but when he ran his finger across it, he realized it was real. The fungus had been growing over something hard, something buried deep within the tree. Using a small shovel they'd brought along, they began to dig away the earth and fungus, revealing a piece of bone. At first it was too big to be anyone's, but as they continued to dig, they uncovered more bones, human bones. With trembling hands, they brushed the dirt off, revealing a complete skeleton. They called the police, and soon forensic teams were combing through the tree for evidence. Inside the giant redwood, they found another skeleton. It took some time to identify them because the bones were so fragile. But eventually, they were able to match the DNA to Nicholas Berg and David Lee. They had been missing for over 4 years, and now they'd finally been found. But the question remained: what had happened to them? The answer might have surprised everyone. After examining the skeletons, the forensic team determined that both men had died instantly. They'd been crushed when the massive redwood fell on them, but that raised another question. If the tree had fallen on them, why was it hollow? If there were 2 skeletons inside the tree, why was it still standing? It was clear that the giant redwood had killed the men, but how? When the answer to the first question was relatively easy, the tree had been dead for several years, but it had taken that long for the fungus to grow enough to cover the inside of the tree. As for the second question, the answer was much more difficult to find. Redwood trees can live for thousands of years, but sometimes they die. When they do, they don't always fall down. Sometimes they stand for hundreds of years, slowly rotting from the inside out. That's what had happened here. And the reason the tree hadn't fallen yet was simply because it hadn't rotted enough. But now that it had been dislodged, perhaps by Mark accidentally stepping on it, the rest was just a matter of time. So now the question was, when had this happened? Had Nicholas and David been crushed to death by a falling tree in broad daylight? Or had the tree fallen during a storm, trapping the men beneath its branches? The answer was neither. The tree had fallen on Nicholas and David sometime between the night of August 5th and the morning of August 6th. They had been crushed to death in the middle of the night, as they slept, then covered in earth and fungus. But why had they been in such a dangerous place? As it turns out, the answer to that question might be even stranger than anything we've told you so far. When Nicholas and David left their car, they must have seen the trail leading into the woods. But they didn't take it. Instead, they turned left and followed an almost invisible path. This was a game trail, a path made by deer and other small animals. They'd have probably been following it for some time when it occurred to them that they should turn around and head back. By this time, it must have been getting dark. The forest was cloaked in heavy fog, making it almost impossible to see. That's when they spotted the huge redwood ahead of them, its branches silhouetted against the fading light. They likely believed it was a safe place to spend the night. But when they huddled together beneath the tree, the ground gave way, causing the massive redwood to fall on them. So why did Nicholas and David take such a dangerous path? Why did they ignore the trail and head into the woods? Unfortunately, we may never know. Perhaps they were trying to shorten the hike, or maybe they were trying to avoid other hikers. Whatever the reason, it cost them their lives. After the discovery of the bodies, both families decided to hold a memorial service at the base of the enormous redwood. In lieu of flowers, they asked that donations be made to the local search and rescue team. As for the redwood, it's still there, standing silently over the grave of its victims. The forest is full of danger and beauty, and sometimes those two things can go hand in hand.